Bikepacking the Colorado Trail covered the spectrum of challenging, rewarding, sketchy and smooth, arduous, and breathtaking all in one. This is my Colorado Trail experience. Day one, or really night one, I started out of the Denver Metro's Waterton Canyon at 9 p.m. and put in about 20 miles over the next few hours. I'd been told that this section, with its vast burn scar from wildfire, was extremely hot during the day without the shade of trees, and that it was best to do it to start at night. Day one was one of the rougher days for me. I was still at my heaviest as far as pack load. I was still getting things dialed. I had some stomach pains going on. And if I'm being honest, I hadn't been putting in as much time in the saddle as I could have prior to the trip. What I thought my conditioning level would be like on the Colorado Trail, what my conditioning is actually like. It doesn't help that coming out of Denver, you're pedaling a major bypass on dirt roads with cars kicking up dust for the first 100 miles until you really hit the meat of the CT. You do get a nice lake dip at Wellington Lake to help cool off, which is really nice. Day two, this is where I felt like I hit my stride. I cranked out some road riding in the morning, more dirt roads, and then finally around 115 miles in, you intercept the CT back around Kenosha Pass. There's this huge sense of relief when you get there to Kenosha Pass of, okay, I'm here, I'm on the trail, I'm doing this. Bypasses are a reality of the CT if you're bike packing it. Bikes aren't allowed on the 6 wilderness areas the CT passes through. This ultimately tacks on another 50 miles, and you certainly miss out on some of the best segments of the CT. But if anything, it's inspired me to want to go back and hike through those wilderness areas without my bike. After passing through beautiful aspen forests and vibrant wildflowers of Kenosha Pass, you ride through some dry forest and head up and over Georgia Pass. That night, I camped just a few miles out of Breckenridge. Day 3, I rode into Breckenridge and found that the trail intercept into town wasn't as close to a resupply as I would have liked. The closest store being a few miles up the highway to Frisco or down into Breckenridge proper. So I just kept going without a resupply, hoping to hit the market at Copper Mountain Village on the other side of the 10-mile range. This section from Breck to Copper, segment 7, is the first taste of high-altitude vertical bike pushing. You're basically carrying your bike up the crest ridge of the 10-mile range at 12,495 feet. With the high elevation and physical exertion from all the hike-a-bikes, I was definitely feeling a little loopy coming over the pass.
And I would bike pack 500 miles, but I probably would not bike pack 500 more. Just to be the man to bike pack 500 miles and arrive at my own door. I
was blessed with beautiful afternoon weather and a sunny and evening descent into Copper Village. But I found I was too late to resupply at the market in Copper as I had hoped. It was closed. This effectively stretched out my supply until I reached Leadville. I did enjoy a nice dinner at the restaurant in the village and ordered extra food to go that would help me get the calories I needed to push through to Leadville. Day 4 started with a stunningly beautiful ride, and now that I have the stripes of having ridden this dang thing, if I were to do it again, I would just start at Copper Mountain. You get a stunning ascent to Kokomo Pass, then a sweet screaming downhill coming off of it, followed by some more uphill, flats, and then a smooth, gentle, downgraded road into Leadville. I met up with my dad here for some much needed resupply and reconfigured my bike a bit. Wearing a backpack over the past 4 days, even with a light load, had wreaked havoc on my upper body, which was not what I was expecting to hurt most. So I ditched the backpack, I got a new saddlebag, with more volume. I gorged on some Mexican food, spent some time with Pops, and got back on the road and didn't stop until around 1:30 a.m. This is how you know you've been on the trail for quite some time. Day 5,
Went pretty late into the night. Ran out of water, but I found a little paradise.
Since I'd been riding so late, I got a late start that morning, so I took off, was able to make it into Buena Vista for some serious calories, and after eating enough for 3 and resupplying at the grocery store, I rode back up into the hills until reaching Mount Princeton Hot Springs for an afternoon soak. Day 6, I was awoken by what sounded like a stampede outside my tent. When I popped my head out, I saw a fellow bikepacker pushing his bike uphill, smiling at me. And he called out something like, "Oh, just spooked 2 young moose and they ran right past you. Still looking for mama though." So that day got off to a quick start and was actually a prelude to all the wildlife I'd be seeing. Day 7, this was where things started to get interesting. The past couple of days had been teasing some weather in the afternoons, but it wasn't anything serious, just some drizzling, distant thunder rolls. But day 7 would push me right into the belly of the beast with some of the hardest cranking and most frantic riding I've ever done. The morning started off normal enough. I definitely was feeling fatigued at this point, but all that would change once the storm rolled in and I found myself in an extremely precarious situation. What had been previously distant thunder rolls caught up to me and lightning started snapping right over my head. To avoid sitting under a lightning rod while I waited out the storm, I picked the smallest, most pathetic little Charlie Brown tree and just crouched under it while Zeus was upstairs smashing his hammer. When there was a break in the storm, I looked at my map, decided I didn't want to be at 12,000 feet anymore in the midst of a lightning storm, and decided to go for it, even though there was still thunder nearby. That riding was some of the most technical, desperate I've ever done. Definitely turned up the effort level to max output / survival mode riding. Whereas only an hour before, I had been struggling to push my pedals down on relatively flat ground. Now I was so adrenalized, I was basically riding uphill, slick rocks, and tree roots as if they were downhill. The storm eventually caught up to me when I was in an exposed meadow, and there was this crucial final push where I felt really exposed and was racing to get to nearby tree cover.
Ah, come on!
Once I got to it, it was instant relief to not be the tallest thing around, and I just dove under the nearest outcropping of forest, completely exhausted. So I finally made it through the valley, picked a tree to stand under, and it turns out I picked the tree right next to another one that had been struck in a previous storm. You can see kind of the burn marks from that lightning strike, which is a pretty crazy coincidence. After waiting out the rest of the storm, I hit the trail again in search of water. I was riding past plenty of streams in the bottom of valleys, but there were cow patties everywhere, and I wasn't fully confident in my water filtration system to filter out all that fun confetti out of the cattle water. So I just kept riding, and I started to hear the thunder rolling in again, getting louder, and now it's dark and it's late. More lightning's on the way. I'm completely dehydrated, and I see some lights in the distance, and that's when I get closer, and I see it's an RV that's basically set up its own little homestead out in the middle of nowhere. 20 minutes later, I'm inside this saint of a man's massive RV, guzzling orange juice and eating my last remaining freeze-dried meal. I spent the night in his RV's toy barn while it stormed outside and was just laughing at how lucky I was to have this guy take me in from the storm. So that day was definitely the hairiest on the trip. Day 8, first thing in the morning, John served me biscuits and gravy, and I knew right away that this day would be better than the last. John was a trail angel in every sense of the word, and I'm just so thankful that he was there at that critical moment when I needed water, shelter, the most basic of human needs, and he took in a stinky, muddy, unkempt stranger without so much as a second thought. I said my sincerest thank yous and goodbyes and rode off into a misty morning that was just gorgeous. That day was all about dirt road riding, and the going was much quicker. I had scheduled a meetup with my dad for the following day, and I was arriving a full 24 hours early, so I was expecting a rest day to myself with limited provisions. But right when I rolled up to our rendezvous spot, there he was, rolling in at that same moment. Absolute perfect timing. He cooked up some steak and potatoes, I cracked a couple brews, and I just took in the comfort of his van while listening to the afternoon monsoons drench down outside and laughing about how I had been riding through that yesterday. Day 9 was a rest day. Pops and I cleaned and dried out all my gear, resupplied my power bars and freeze-dried meals, and I made sweet, sweet love to his foam roller on the top of a picnic table. After the afternoon storms had cleared, I made the call to once again hit the trail that night while things were still calm and just got in a few miles. Day 10, I awoke early to try to complete the 35-mile push to Silverton in one go. I was nervous going into the day because of my previous trauma with the lightning and knowing that the lowest point across this whole segment was just under 12,000 feet with no tree cover this time. It was one of the most scenic segments of the CT though, up until that point, and even though I felt the urgency of getting into Silverton before storms could close in, I couldn't help but stop and just take loads of pictures. It was too beautiful. I made it into Silverton, getting soaked along the way, but no lightning. Day 11. Since I was at this point officially in my own backyard on the home stretch, I was all smiles. Once I saw Engineer peak, I knew that I was so close to home. And far and away, my favorite section of the CT was between Little Mullis Lake and Durango. The wildflowers, stunning geological formations and colors, waterfalls. It just really hit the spot for me, and it probably also helped that I knew I was close to completing my goal and home sweet home. It did end up raining consistently throughout the afternoon and evening, and it was just comically miserable as I pitched my tent that night, completely muddy and wet.
Never a dull moment. Rained like crazy. I've got these guys dripping on me. Everything in the tent totally soaked.
But I still had really high spirits despite the miserable conditions. I slept maybe an hour, then decided at 2:30 a.m. that lying in a dripping tent, pretending to sleep just wasn't getting me anywhere, so I started off on the home stretch, final 30 miles. Maybe it was the previous 12 days or maybe it was the hour of sleep, but this last section took forever to finish. But that made the finish line that much more rewarding since I truly felt like I had no more gas in the tank at the end of it. I rode all the way home to my house, and once home, I was met with plenty of puppy licks. So that's it. Total ascent of 72,500 feet, or 2.5 Mount Everests, if you like. I'm super grateful to have had the opportunity to ride the CT. Having moved from Denver to Durango, it just made sense to me to want to be able to bike that distance and see everything the Rockies had to offer in between. There were both literal and figurative highs and lows, and that's all part of it. I learned to adapt to a simple existence of just eat, sleep, and ride, which is really refreshing, actually. Of course, there are some things I would do differently. I think everyone comes away from something like this with a bit more experience, but on the whole, I loved the ride and came away with way more appreciation for the kindness I experienced out there on the trail and just the sheer beauty that the trail brings to you.